I honestly thought this was a joke. I saw the headline, I saw the picture, and I thought, okay, surely this is AI. Surely this is a deep fake. Because there is no world, no rational universe where the governor of Michigan, a woman who was supposedly the future of the Democratic Party, is playing a game of peekaboo behind a stack of blue folders in the Oval Office. But no, it's real. I want you to look at this image. This is Gretchen Whitmer. This is Big Gretch. This is the woman who told us that Donald Trump was a danger to the Republic. And yet there she is, physically shielding her face like a high schooler trying to sneak past the principal, because she's ashamed to be seen collaborating with the very man she spent 4 years warning us about. And look, I get it. I can hear the consultants already. I can hear the West Wing brain poison strategists whispering in my ear, but Brian, you don't understand. This is how politics works. She's getting F-15s for the base in Macomb County. She's being pragmatic. Give me a break. We have to stop pretending that pragmatism is a synonym for humiliation, because that is what this is. This isn't a masterclass in bipartisan governance. It is a masterclass in submission. The White House, Donald Trump's White House, is openly bragging to reporters that Whitmer is their favorite Democrat. Do you understand how damning that is? They aren't saying she's a tough negotiator. They aren't saying she's a worthy adversary. They are saying she's their favorite. Why? Because she's the one who plays along. She's the one who visits the White House more than any other Democratic governor. She's the one who, after this embarrassing photo went viral, didn't issue a statement standing her ground. No, according to reports, the next time she visited, she autographed a copy of the newspaper with the photo on it and gave it to Trump as a gift.
She signed the receipt of her own capitulation. And honestly, it's pathetic. It's actually painful to watch. Because while Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker are out there drawing lines in the sand, calling Trump a tyrant, and actually acting like an opposition party, Whitmer is treating the presidency like it's just a normal administration that you can charm. Here is the reality that the reasonable Democrats don't want you to see. You cannot charm a bulldozer. You cannot find common ground with a movement that is explicitly designed to dismantle the ground you're standing on. By playing this game, by thinking she can be the nice Democrat, the safe option for 2028, Whitmer isn't saving her state. She is validating his power. She is telling every voter in Michigan that the things Trump does aren't that bad, provided he gives you a few fighter jets in return. And that is a fatal error. It's not just bad optics. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of the moment we are in. And if we don't call this out, if we don't dissect exactly why this go-along-to-get-along strategy is a suicide pact for the Democratic Party, then we deserve to lose. So let's look at the receipts. Let's look at what she actually traded for this special relationship and ask ourselves, was it worth selling out the resistance? Now, I want to be fair here. I want to look at the argument the Whitmer camp is making. I want to take their logic at face value. Their argument is essentially this. Look, Brian, you're being too idealistic. We have a Republican president. We have to work with him. And because Governor Whitmer has swallowed her pride, because she's played the game, she has delivered actual results for the people of Michigan.
Okay, fine. Let's test that hypothesis. Let's actually pull up the receipts and see what this special relationship has bought the people of Michigan. Because when you strip away the spin, when you ignore the anonymous sources in the White House gushing about how nice she is, the math simply does not add up. Let's go back to April 29th, 2025. This is the date that the Whitmer team points to as the crown jewel of her strategy. President Trump flies into Michigan. He visits the Selfridge Air National Guard base. Now, for those of you who don't follow Michigan politics closely, this base is a massive deal. It's in Macomb County, a critical swing county that Trump carried by nearly 14 points in 2024. The base was in danger of losing its mission, which would have been an economic catastrophe for the region. So, Whitmer goes to the White House. She does the blue folder dance. She plays nice. And lo and behold, Trump announces a new fleet of F-15EX Eagle II fighter jets for the base. Boom, mission accomplished, right? The governor smiles, the president takes credit, and the jobs are saved. If you stop the tape right there, the strategy looks like genius. It looks like the ultimate act of pragmatic governance. But we don't stop the tape there, because here's the part they're not telling you. Here is the cost of doing business with a man who views governance as a transaction rather than a duty. Fast forward just a few months to August. Michigan gets hit by a massive ice storm. We are talking about crippling infrastructure damage. We are talking about struggling utilities. We are talking about real people, rural voters, by the way, the very people Trump claims to champion, facing the prospect of utility rate hikes of at least $4,500 per household. $4,500. That is a crushing amount of money for a working family. That is choose between groceries and heat money.
So naturally, you would assume that Trump's favorite Democrat would be able to pick up the phone, right? You would assume that after all the autograph signing, after all the photo ops, after all the degrading deference she showed him in the Oval Office, she could call her pal in the White House and get the federal disaster aid released. What happened? The request was denied. Denied. Let that sink in. The same president who is happy to use Whitmer as a prop to announce fighter jets, because fighter jets are cool and they make him look strong and they help him in a county he won, couldn't care less about rural families facing a $4,500 bill because there was no photo op in it for him. And where was the special relationship then? Where was the influence? It evaporated because it never existed in the first place. This is what makes me so incredibly frustrated with this strategy. Whitmer and her team are acting like they have discovered a cheat code. They think they have cracked the code of the Trump presidency, but they haven't. All they have done is expose themselves as easy marks. Donald Trump didn't give Michigan fighter jets because he likes Gretchen Whitmer. He gave them fighter jets because he wanted to stand in front of a fighter jet in Macomb County. Period. The moment she asked for something that didn't directly benefit his ego or his political standing, like boring, unsexy disaster aid for ice storm recovery, he left her on red. And it gets worse. We need to talk about the auto industry. According to Whitmer's own political aide, the governor has been pushing back on the president's tariffs. Now, why does she need to push back? Because 9.2% of Michigan's economy is tied to the auto industry, nearly 1 in 10 jobs. And Donald Trump's tariff policies, which are effectively a tax on American consumers and a wrecking ball for global supply chains, are an existential threat to that industry. So how is the favorite Democrat handling this existential threat? Is she going on TV and blasting the policy? Is she rallying other governors to sue the administration? Is she using her platform to explain to the American people that Trump is killing Michigan jobs? No. According to reports, she is taking a softer tone in private meetings. She is criticizing cuts to Medicaid during private meetings. Are you kidding me? Private criticism is the political equivalent of thoughts and prayers. It does absolutely nothing. Do you think Donald Trump cares if you furrow your brow in a private meeting? Do you think he loses sleep because you politely pointed out that his tax legislation cuts Medicaid? Of course not. He laughs at that. He respects strength. He respects leverage. And by refusing to take the fight to the public, by refusing to weaponize public opinion against him, Whitmer has voluntarily surrendered the only leverage she has. She has traded her voice for access. And what is that access getting her? A seat at the table while he carves up the social safety net? A front row ticket to the deindustrialization of her own state? It is the definition of a bad deal. And this brings me back to the autograph. I cannot get over the autograph. We learned that after the New York Times published that photo of her hiding behind the folders, a photo that made her look weak, a photo that made her look guilty, she didn't get angry, she didn't fire back. She signed a copy of the newspaper and gave it to him as a gift. Think about the psychology of that. She took a moment of her own humiliation, a moment where she was literally cowering from his presence, and turned it into a tribute to him. She framed her own submission and handed it to him. What message does that send? It tells him that he owns her. It tells him that no matter what he does, no matter how much he insults her, remember, this is the man who called her that woman from Michigan and left her out to dry during a pandemic. She will always come crawling back for a pat on the head. It is embarrassing, but more importantly, it is dangerous. Because when you validate a bully, you don't make him nicer. You make him bolder. You prove to him that there are no consequences for his actions. You prove to him that the opposition is soft. So, when we look at the scorecard, the forensic evidence of this relationship, what do we actually see? We see one win for the military-industrial complex in a red county. We see a massive loss for rural families facing financial ruin from an ice storm. We see a massive threat to the auto industry via tariffs that are still in place. We see Medicaid cuts that are still moving forward. And we see a Democratic governor who has been reduced to a prop in the president's reality TV show. This isn't a strategy. This is a surrender. And the worst part? The Whitmer team is proud of it. They are leaking this to Politico like it's a success story. They want credit for this. They want us to look at this wreckage of dignity and policy failures and say, wow, look how smart she is. She's really playing the game. Well, I'm looking at the scoreboard, folks, and frankly, she's getting played. But this isn't just about Gretchen Whitmer. If this were just one governor making a bad calculation, we could write it off. But this is bigger than her. This is a symptom of a much deeper rot within the Democratic establishment's approach to power. Because when you zoom out, you realize that this isn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern. And it's a pattern that has led us to the brink of irrelevance time and time again.
But let's step back. Because if we treat Gretchen Whitmer as a rogue agent, we miss the point. If we treat this as just one governor making a quirky decision to autograph a newspaper for a narcissist, we are ignoring the elephant in the room. This isn't a glitch in the Democratic operating system. This is the operating system. What we are witnessing in Michigan is the latest, most painful iteration of a disease that has plagued the Democratic establishment for decades, the fetishization of the adult in the room. There is this pathological need among a certain class of Democratic consultant, the people whispering in Whitmer's ear right now, to prove that they are reasonable. They are terrified of being seen as partisan. They are terrified of being seen as angry. So when faced with a Republican Party that has completely abandoned the norms of democracy, a party that operates entirely on bad faith, obstruction, and culture war grievances, what do these Democrats do? Do they fight fire with fire? No, they bake a cake. They show up with a smile and a handshake, desperate to prove that the system still works. It is the political equivalent of Charlie Brown trying to kick the football. Lucy pulls it away every single time. Every single time. And yet here comes Gretchen Whitmer running full speed at the football, convinced that this time, because she brought F-15s and a signed newspaper, Lucy is going to let her kick it. It is embarrassing, but it is also a betrayal of reality, because we have a control group here. We don't have to guess what the alternative looks like. We can look at California. We can look at Illinois. Look at Gavin Newsom. Look at J.B. Pritzker.
Now you don't have to agree with everything Newsom or Pritzker does. You don't have to love every policy. But look at how they are treating the Trump presidency. The article explicitly notes this contrast. It points out that while Whitmer is hiding behind folders, Newsom and Pritzker are out there calling Trump a tyrant. They are describing his administration as a fundamental threat to American democracy. They are defining the terms of the engagement. Newsom and Pritzker understand something that Whitmer clearly does not. We are not in a normal political cycle. We are in an asymmetrical war. One side is trying to dismantle the administrative state, deport millions of people, and weaponize the Department of Justice against its enemies. The other side, the Whitmer side, is worried about tone. The contrast is absolutely staggering. While Newsom is positioning himself as the leader of the resistance, rallying donors, building a firewall of state-level protections, preparing for legal battles, Whitmer is positioning herself as the teacher's pet of the MAGA class. And listen to the justification. Listen to what her own aide told reporters. This quote makes my blood boil. The aide said, "Leadership means finding common ground where you can so you can get things done." Stop. Just stop. Finding common ground? With who? With the man who tried to overturn the 2020 election? With the man who demonized her personally in 2020 to the point that extremists plotted to kidnap her? This is the lie at the heart of the moderate Democratic strategy. They think common ground is a virtue in and of itself. But common ground is only a virtue if the ground you are standing on isn't sinking. When you seek common ground with an arsonist, you don't get a safer house, you just get burned.
By accepting the premise that she needs to work with Trump to succeed, Whitmer is validating his entire worldview. She's telling the public, see, he's not a monster. He's just a president I disagree with sometimes.
That is the normalization trap, and this is where the strategy moves from naive to destructive. Think about the message this sends for the electorate for 2028. The entire Democratic argument against Donald Trump, the argument we made in 2016, 2020, and 2024, was that he is unfit for office, that he is a unique danger to the republic, that he is effectively radioactive. But if the potential Democratic nominee for 2028 is palling around with him, if she's signing autographs for him, if she's cutting deals for fighter jets, then the argument collapses. How is she going to stand on a debate stage in 2028 and call him a threat to democracy when she spent 4 years treating him like a normal colleague? How is she going to attack his record when she helped him build it? She can't. She is unilaterally disarming herself before the primary even begins. And look at the political strategist quoted in the report, John McCarthy. He nailed it. He said, Democratic voters want leaders who don't just manage around Trump, but define a bold post-Trump future and draw a sharp contrast. Exactly. We don't want managers. We don't want people who can manage the decline of American democracy. We want people who will stop it. We want people who will draw a sharp, bright line and say, this is wrong, this is unacceptable, and I will not normalize it for a check, for a military base. But Whitmer is doing the opposite. She is blurring the lines. She is creating a permission structure for voters to say, well, if Big Gretch can work with him, maybe he's not so bad. And this brings us to the liability factor.
All right, so the article mentions that this chumminess could be a liability in a primary. That is the understatement of the century. If Gretchen Whitmer thinks she can walk into a Democratic primary in 2028 after 4 years of Trump's deportation camps, after 4 years of gutting the EPA, after 4 years of judicial appointments that will haunt us for decades, and say, hey guys, remember when I got those jets from Macomb County? Remember when I signed that newspaper for him? Wasn't that cute? She's going to get shredded, and she should be, because the base of the Democratic Party, the people who knock on doors, the people who donate $25 a month, the people who actually decide elections, we aren't looking for affable. We aren't looking for productive relationships with fascists. We are looking for a fighter. This is why the West Wing brain rot is so dangerous. These consultants think that voters want bipartisanship above all else. They look at polls from 1995 and think, oh, the voters love it when the parties get along. Newsflash, the voters who want bipartisanship are already voting for Republicans. They're not coming to save us. The Democratic base wants to know that you understand the stakes. When Gavin Newsom goes on TV and calls Trump a tyrant, maybe it turns off a few moderate suburbanites in Grand Rapids. Maybe, but it electrifies the base. It tells us that he sees what we see. It validates our reality. When Whitmer hides behind a folder, she invalidates our reality. She tells us that our anger is misplaced. She tells us that we should just calm down and learn to work with the guy. It is gaslighting, pure and simple, and it's part of a historical pattern of Democratic failure. Look at Merrick Garland. Why did Obama pick Merrick Garland? Because he was a consensus candidate. He was reasonable. Republicans had praised him in the past. The strategy was, if we pick someone so reasonable, so moderate, the Republicans won't be able to say no.
What did the Republicans do? They said no. They stole the seat. They laughed in our faces. Look at the obsession with the bipartisan infrastructure bill while voting rights were allowed to die on the vine. We built some bridges. Great. But we let the foundation of democracy crumble because we didn't want to upset the filibuster, because we wanted to be institutionalists. Gretchen Whitmer is the heir to this failed legacy. She is the new face of the institutionalist delusion. She thinks that if she respects the institution of the presidency, Trump will respect her. He won't. He will use her. He will extract what he needs from her. The photo ops, the legitimacy, the bipartisan veneer. And then, the moment she becomes a threat, the moment she actually announces a run for 2028, he will turn on her. He will crush her. He will weaponize the very relationship she tried to build. He will say, Gretchen came to me begging. She was begging for help. I gave her the jets. I saved her state. And now she attacks me? Very disloyal. I can write the tweet for him right now. It's inevitable. And when that happens, she will have no defense. She won't be able to say, I fought him every step of the way. She will have to explain why she was smiling in the photos. This is the tragedy of the pattern of behavior. It never works. It never buys you protection. It only buys you a temporary reprieve. And the cost of that reprieve is your soul. The cost is your credibility. So when we look at Newsom and Pritzker versus Whitmer, we aren't just looking at different communication styles. We are looking at two fundamentally different theories of change. One theory says, the system is broken, the opponent is dangerous, and we must fight. The other theory says, the system is fine, the opponent is manageable, and we must collaborate.
History has shown us time and time again which theory is correct. And it is terrifying that in 2025, one of our leading figures still hasn't learned the lesson. But if you think the consequences of this are just about losing an election, you are not thinking big enough. The stakes here aren't just about 2028. They are about what happens to a country when the opposition party forgets how to oppose. And this brings us to the endgame. We need to have a very serious conversation about where this road ends. Because if you think this ends with Gretchen Whitmer getting a few fighter jets and everyone going back to brunch, you are delusional. The road we are on, the road of normalizing a movement that has explicitly declared war on democratic institutions, does not end in a one-party state, where the opposition exists only in name. The historians who study how democracies die tell us the same thing over and over again. Democracy doesn't usually end with a bang. It doesn't end with tanks in the streets. It ends with a handshake. It ends when the opposition party decides that it is safer to collaborate than to resist. It ends when the reasonable people decide that they can manage the authoritarian by playing to his ego, only to wake up one day and realize they have handed him the keys to the kingdom. Gretchen Whitmer thinks she is managing Donald Trump, but in reality, she is constructing a permission structure for him. By treating his administration as normal, she is telling the American public that the emergency is over. She is signaling that the threat to democracy we screamed about for 8 years was just campaign rhetoric. And once you admit that, once you signal that your principles were negotiable all along, you can never get them back. Imagine the general election in 2028.
Imagine Gretchen Whitmer on a debate stage against Trump's hand-picked successor. Maybe it's J.D. Vance, or maybe it's someone else. And imagine her trying to make the case that the Republican agenda is dangerous. The Republican candidate will just turn to the camera, smile, and say, "Dangerous? Governor Whitmer didn't think we were dangerous when she was begging us for money. She didn't think we were dangerous when she was signing autographs for President Trump in the Oval Office. If we're so bad, Governor, why were you our favorite Democrat? Game over. She loses that debate before she even opens her mouth. You cannot fight a monster while holding a receipt for the favors he did you. This is why the blue folder moment isn't just a gaffe, it is a symbol of a party that has forgotten its purpose. The purpose of the Democratic Party right now is not to be affabable. It is not to be liked by the MAGA sphere. Its purpose is to be the firewall. Its purpose is to stand between the American people and the erosion of their rights and say, no further. If we lose that, if we replace the firewall with a welcome mat because we think it's smart politics, then we have already lost the country. So here is the bottom line. We cannot afford leaders who are auditioning for the role of collaborator-in-chief. We need leaders who understand that you do not negotiate with an arsonist while he is holding the match. Gretchen Whitmer may have gotten her fighter jets. She may have gotten her productive relationship, but she has sold out the moral authority of the opposition to get it. And frankly, the price was too cheap.
The Democratic Party needs to wake up. We need to stop rewarding this weakness and start demanding the kind of spine we see from leaders who aren't afraid to be hated by the wrong people. Because if we don't, 2028 isn't going to be an election. It's going to be a coronation. And honestly, if we let that happen, we will have no one to blame but ourselves.